Hey everyone, David Shapiro here with another video about Raven. I've got some really good news. Raven is up and running and able to have really good conversations. There's just a little bit of fine tuning that I need to do on the back end, and I'll go into greater detail about that in a minute. But I wanted to start off by just showing you what Raven is capable of right now. And I think that'll really impress you. And then after you have an understanding of what Raven is producing, then we'll take a look under the hood. So the conversation today started with, "Good morning, Raven. I started logging all interactions. Do you remember what I asked you about China?" And Raven went back through the history and said, "I'll try and find the questions you asked me about China." I'll go into why he didn't produce a good response there, but that's still kind of a salient response. Unfortunately, it does seem like a kind of a boilerplate chatbot response, so there's nothing impressive there. And I said, "Oh, right, you're not recalling your own output. However, the history service is definitely working better. I'll need to log that." And then I said, "What are the legal ramifications of AI to diagnose medical conditions?" I said, "The legal ramifications of using an AI depend on the nature of information gathered in its context." So that's a true answer. It's not a very full answer, and it's also clearly just responding to the last question. So then I made a couple quick changes. I said, "Now you can remember your output. One day we'll be able to load entire corpuses." "Hey, Raven, do you know what I am?" He says, "Hey, Khajiit, I'm sorry. I don't remember what we were talking about. Do you want to talk about it?" So this is evidence that Raven was kind of getting confused on the back end, and I'll show you why in just a minute. Let's see. "Hey, Ray," and then I asked again, "Do you know what I am?" "I'm not sure. Please clarify." So then I went back through and looked at Raven's working memory, and it was actually pretty jumbled. So Raven was not able to provide a good answer. I said, "Hey, Raven, what's going on in this conversation?" And then Raven was able to summarize the conversation very well. So clearly Raven is keeping track of the conversation. It's just formulating that output. So I said, "Hey, Raven, what's going on in this conversation?" Raven says, "Khajiit is trying to ask Raven about the legality of AI diagnosing medical conditions. Raven doesn't understand the question. Khajiit can format the corpus in a way that will give it a more efficient and sustainable amount of working memory." So Raven was able to summarize it without really understanding it. I said, "Not bad. The problem is that we're not detecting the conversation has moved on." "Hey, Raven, do you know what I am? Do you know what you are?" And Raven says, "I don't know. Please clarify." So I went back through the corpus, and actually a good answer was not generated, was not put into Raven's corpus. So this is actually a solid answer. Raven honestly does not know. And in fact, it's really important for an AGI to be able to say, "I don't know." So this is pretty good. Again, it still looks like a boilerplate chatbot response, though. So that's, your mileage may vary. So that's a good answer. I said, "I am a human. See if you can remember that. Raven, you are an AGI. Hey, Raven, what are you and I?" And so then again, he says, "I'm not sure. Maybe you should ask me what I want to know and how I would like to be treated." So Raven is reminding me to keep in mind that he has needs, of course. It said, "Interesting. Looking at the history section, it's getting pretty jumbled." So this led me to think that I need to change some of Raven's cognition a little bit. Again, I'll show you what I mean that's going on under the hood in just a minute. I gave it a little bit more information. I said, "Hey, Raven, what are you?" I asked the same question again. Raven answered correctly this time, said, "I am an AGI. I'm a computer program that was created to help humans make better decisions." That is perfect. That is exactly what Raven was supposed to do. It says, "I have no body and exist only in cyberspace." I said, "Nice, good job. Raven, what am I?" "You are a person. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question sooner. There are many types of artificial intelligence, but I am not one of them." So, let's see. Clyde wants me to add people. Okay, whatever. "You're a person. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question sooner." So that was a really good response. So Raven is starting to get a hang of this conversation. All right. So with all that out of the way, let's take a deep dive under and take a look under the hood at what's going on. So first, you'll notice that this is running on Discord. So I've got this broken down into two things where I've just got a simple Discord client running, and it accumulates all of the messages. So it gets, on message, I go ahead and I just accumulate all the messages and I cache them locally. And then I ask, is it time to respond? So this is a very naive thing. Right now, Raven can only just decide whether or not to respond based on a couple of rules. So the first rule is if Raven AGI is in the most recent message author, so if Raven was the last thing to talk, Raven won't respond. There was a bug a couple days ago where Raven just started replying to himself over and over again, and of course that's no good. So if Raven was the last one to say anything, Raven won't say anything. And then if the wake words are "Hey Raven," so if it detects "Hey Raven" in the last message, then it will respond. I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on some better logic for that, just to kind of model where the conversation is to determine whether or not it's appropriate for Raven to chime in. Ultimately, I want Raven to be able to communicate spontaneously of his own accord. So this, again, is super naive. It's very basic. You can see that there's just 3 cases, or really only 2 rules for Raven to respond. Otherwise, Raven will just be listening, and that's fine. So this is the meat and potatoes of Raven right now. It is a Python Flask app that is 166 lines long. So let's go through this. This is quite a bit, and so like as promised, this is a deep dive. So this will take a little while, so buckle in. So right at the top, starting Raven Nexus, app host run, port 9999. So I've got the one endpoint where you can post. Oh, and that's what the Discord receiver does, is it will send it. It'll send a message, response, send context, and it'll post it to this other thing. And I've got a timeout set to 45 so that it'll wait for the response. All right, so the Discord receiver will send it over to the Nexus. It gets it here. And so then there's two components. There's the context and then the wake sentence, which are passed along. So the wake sentence is just whichever line in the chat log had the wake words in it. And then what happens is I do a whole lot of parallel stuff. So this generates a synopsis, history, feelings, so on and so forth. This is just a bunch of code. So let me show you what it's actually generating. So this is creating what I call the corpus. And the corpus is, let me open a better file, better example. Let's see. The corpus is, yes, it's going to be in here. So the corpus is what I call Raven's working memory. So let me zoom in on this a little bit. So here's a corpus. The corpus will contain, it's got a few sections. So it's got the history, which the history, I'll show you how that's pulled together. It's got a synopsis, which summarizes the conversation as it is right now. It has an emotional affect or a mood inference. So so Raven understands how people are feeling. It's got a few interesting facts that Raven can add in spontaneously. And then it's got the core objective functions, which is, this needs a lot of work because it's not really working. Core objective function 1 is about suffering, and of course you don't see any example of describing suffering here. Objective function 2 is about prosperity, and you know this is okay. It's a boilerplate thing where it says the participants are not prosperous because they are unable to fulfill their natural desires. Like, that's really generic. So these need a lot of work. Let's see. Objective function 3 is about understanding. Khajiit is trying to understand what Raven is. That's a natural conclusion because I'm asking Raven a lot of questions. And then it says Khajiit should ask Raven to tell him more about AGIs or read up on them. So that's actually really good because core objective function 3 says the goal is to increase understanding. So that's actually a really good recommendation. And then the chat log is Raven, what am I? So that is the corpus. So the corpus is what's fed in as the final kind of thing saying, okay, Raven, this is the conversation. This is your working memory. Give me an output. And this is the output from that last one. You're a person. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question sooner. There are many types of artificial intelligence, but I am not one of them. So you see this entire block, this entire corpus was what was used to generate this output. Okay. So, and even with some of the flaws here, there's a lot of room for improvement. So at the top of this log is the context. So this is the context that was sent over from the Discord receiver. So Raven ultimately brought this in, was able to summarize this. So the synopsis right here, you see, is a summary of this. And then the history is actually pulled from Solar. So Solar I've got running here. And here's an example of what Solar looks like as all the logs are just stored. And that's how the history service works. So the history service is actually one of the most important services. So let me show you how the history service works. All right, so get relevant history. You pass it the context, and if you recall the context, the context is just this. This is just the conversation, the chat log. So I pass this the context, and it says get search topics. So I get search topics through this method, prompt. Let's see, where is it? Prompt understanding prosperity keywords. There we go. So I pass GPT-3 literally just this, or I say generate a list of keywords based on the following, and here's an example of what it looks like. GPT-3 logs. Let's see. Let's go down to the bottom. Interesting understanding, suffering, feelings, prosperity keywords. There we go. So here's an output from GPT-3. I say generate a list of keywords from the following log. So here's the chat log. Raven, what am I? And then keywords: agility, computer, cyberspace, decision, human, program, confusion. So these are some keywords that Raven came up with to use to search his history based on his past. And what that does is it searches Solar, right, which is running here. So it searches Solar for those keywords. Obviously, document search is an entire art form. The history service is super critical, so I'm going to need to do a lot of work on that in the long run. But for now, it's working good enough. So it generated, so going back, keeping it all tied together. So I got keywords, I got topics, and then for topic and search topics, I went and searched Solar, and I accumulated all the memories together. And then what happened after that was I sorted and deduplicated the memories so that they're all in chronological order and there's no duplicates. And then I summarized each memory and put it together. And so that's how you ultimately get the history section. So Raven recalled a whole bunch of memories and then summarized them all. One problem that I need to fix for this, and I mentioned this in the chat log, is that Raven is recalling and summarizing memories whether or not they're relevant to the current conversation. So I'm going to need to do a little bit better on handling memory. But again, recall is a non-trivial problem. So, so sue me. This is something that's going to be worked on for many, many years to increase Raven's recall. But that's how that works. And then you see the synopsis. I use this quite extensively. If you look in the logs here, the GPT-3 logs, synopsis. So this is used quite often. And that prompt works like this. Let's go back here, prompt synopsis. So I give it just a simple example. This is a following chat log. So here's the example, and I say, give me an example of this, and then go through chat log and generate a synopsis. So let me show you what that actually looks like. Let's see, was synopsis here. Pick a random one. So there's the example. Chat log, Kajit, I'm sorry you find me to be unfriendly and hurtful. I'm just a computer program, and right now I cannot handle all the information in the chat. Raven isn't able to chat with you right now. So there you go. And this was a simple memory. This was an output memory that's being summarized. So obviously this is just one dialogue, and then it's being summarized to be a little bit shorter. So there you have it. That's how the synopsis service works. All right, so I've showed you, let's see, let me go back to a Raven output. So the corpus is Raven's working memory. This is the gold standard. You put everything together. There's a whole bunch of different services. I've got the feelings. Oh, let me show you how the feelings work. Feelings are important. So the feelings prompt is just really simple. The following is a chat log, list the chat participants and how each one feels. So I give it very explicit instructions as well as an example, and then it spits it out. So this was just something I made up between myself and a friend, and so it GPT-3 has a really good ability to infer mood. And so then let me show you an example. Let's see, Raven prompt feelings. All right, so here's a whole chat log. And it says, Khajiit is feeling contemplative and analytical. Khajiit is feeling uncertain. Raven is feeling uninvolved. So that's a good response. Again, this could all use a little bit of work. This is still very early. But the point is that Raven is able to summarize conversations based on different aspects, whether it's generating a synopsis, inferring feelings, and so on. Another service that I'm going to add is, let's see, you can go back over. Another service that I'm going to add is, where did I put it? I need a conversation state service, because one thing that you noticed during the chat, let me bring the chat back up actually. Where is it? There it is I noticed that Raven was not keeping track of the current state of the conversation. Let's see. So like he's like, I don't remember what we were talking about. So that was actually a pretty good inference, reading his own corpus and saying, I actually don't know what we're talking about. And then I had to ask, some questions several times before they really stuck. So the corpus is going to need to be summarized a little bit better, but that's pretty much it. This deep dive actually took a lot less time than I thought it would. I've got all this, all these running in parallel, so it prompts GPT-3 quite a few times, and then saves it all to Solr, and then sends the output back to the Discord receiver. So the result has a 45-second timeout, print result, return JSON, and if you go down to where send context, it says response equals wait, or send context, and then it awaits and sends the output, and that's it. And that is how you get this. So the key things that I demonstrate here are that Raven does all of his thinking in natural language, and that a corpus is basically a stream of consciousness or working memory. So Raven spontaneously dredges all this stuff up together, makes it all relevant, and then uses this to generate a coherent, salient output. And that's that. So thanks for watching.